Look, if you want to know how I went from being the power behind $1 million furniture company to, well, let me just say karma's a real witch when she decides to show up. But before I get into all that drama, and trust me, there's plenty, just hit that like button if you're here for the tea and don't forget to subscribe because this story is absolutely wild. Anyway, where was I right the beginning of my spectacular downfall? I'm Caitlin. I'm 36 and 8 months ago, I thought I had it all figured out. I was the COO of Aura Designs, engaged to the CEO Elijah, and basically running a company that was making serious money in high-end minimalist furniture. Elijah was 34, this creative type who could sketch a chair that would sell for $3,000 but couldn't balance a checkbook to save his life. That's where I came in. I was the shark, the strategy, the one who actually made his pretty little drawings profitable. We'd been together for 2 years, engaged for 6 months, and I'd been COO for 3 years total. Everyone thought we were this perfect power couple, the creative genius and his business-savvy fiancé. What they didn't know was how much I resented being seen as just his support system. I was the one staying up until midnight, crunching numbers, negotiating with suppliers, dealing with the actual business while he got to play artist. Don't get me wrong. Elijah was good at what he did, but he was also incredibly naive about how business actually works. He trusted people too easily, always wanted to do the right thing, even when it cost us money. The company structure seemed simple enough on paper. Elijah held 24% as founder and CEO. Vincent, our head of sales, held 25%, and some mysterious LLC held 51%. This silent partner had put up the initial $2 million in seed money, but never voted, never showed up to meetings, never even sent an email. For all practical purposes, it was just Elijah, Vincent, and me running things with Vincent, and Elijah making the actual decisions, since they were the only board members. But here's what really got under my skin. I was doing all the heavy lifting, making all the hard decisions, but I had zero equity and zero voting power. I was just an employee, even though I was engaged to the CEO. Every night I'd go home to our shared apartment, look at my engagement ring, and think about how I was building someone else's empire. Elijah would talk about our company, our future, but legally, I owned nothing. If something happened to our relationship, I'd walk away with nothing but my salary history. The worst part was watching Vincent get credit for sales numbers that I'd strategically planned. He was decent at his job, sure, but he was also young, impressionable, and not that bright. He'd present quarterly reports using analysis I'd done, close deals I'd set up, and everyone would praise his natural sales instincts. Meanwhile, I'm in the background making it all happen. And what do I get? Great job supporting the team, Caitlin. I started noticing things about Elijah too. How he'd light up when talking about his designs, but zone out when I tried to discuss profit margins. How he'd spend hours perfecting a prototype, but couldn't be bothered to review vendor contracts. He was passionate about his art. I'll give him that, but passion doesn't pay the bills or build sustainable businesses. I was the one thinking 3 steps ahead, planning for growth, identifying market opportunities. He was just creating pretty things and hoping they'd sell. Our relationship had started to feel more like a business partnership than a romance, which was fine by me. I'm not some hopeless romantic. I'm practical. But what wasn't fine was being the junior partner in a business I was essentially running. Every major decision went through Elijah first, even though half the time he just asked me what I thought anyway. It was like being a ghost CEO, doing all the work, but getting none of the recognition or legal protection. The engagement ring on my finger started feeling less like a promise and more like a consolation prize. Sure, we'd get married eventually, but that didn't guarantee me anything in terms of the business. And if I'm being completely real here, the romantic feelings had been fading for months. Elijah was comfortable, safe, but he wasn't ambitious in the way I needed him to be. He was content with moderate success while I could see the potential for something much bigger. The idea didn't come to me all at once. It grew slowly, like a plant I didn't realize I was watering. It started with small frustrations that built into bigger resentments and eventually into a plan that seemed not just logical but inevitable. Vincent had been coming to me more and more often with questions about company direction. Caitlin, what do you think about expanding into commercial contracts? Should we be worried about this new competitor? How do we increase our profit margins? The kid was hungry for success, and he was starting to see that I had the answers Elijah didn't. During one of our late-night strategy sessions, just the two of us in the conference room going over quarterly projections, Vincent made a comment that stuck with me. You know, you should really be the one making these decisions. You understand the business side better than anyone. It was innocent enough, but it planted a seed. I started paying more attention to the company structure, really digging into the bylaws and incorporation documents. That's when I discovered something interesting about our mysterious 51% partner. The LLC was called Angel Investor LLC, and according to my research, it was connected to a venture capital fund that had gone defunct years ago. The contact information led to dead ends, and there was no recent activity on any of the associated accounts. It's just dead money, I told Vincent during another one of our evening meetings. This silent partner is basically a ghost. For all practical purposes, you and Elijah are the only real voting members of the board, and you hold 25% to his 24%. Vincent's eyes lit up with understanding. So technically, I have the majority vote, Technically, yes, but you'd never use it against Elijah, right? You guys are partners. But I could see the wheels turning in his head. Vincent was ambitious, and he was starting to realize that his loyalty to Elijah might be holding him back. Over the next few weeks, I carefully fed that ambition. I'd mentioned how Elijah's latest designs were getting a bit stale, or how his reluctance to expand was limiting our growth potential. Nothing too direct. Just observations that let Vincent draw his own conclusions. The breakthrough came when we lost a major contract because Elijah insisted on using more expensive sustainable materials that the client didn't want to pay for. It was a $200, $1,000 deal that walked away because of his principles. That night, Vincent came to my office frustrated and ready to vent. We could have made that work, he said, pacing around my office. If we'd just been more flexible on the materials, more willing to negotiate. Elijah's not a negotiator. I agreed. He's an artist, and artists don't always make the best business decisions. Sometimes I think... Vincent stopped himself. Think what? Sometimes I think this company could be so much more if we had different leadership. Someone who understood that business is about making money, not just making beautiful things. That's when I knew I had him. Vincent was ready to make a move. He just needed someone to give him permission and show him how. I spent the next week researching the legal requirements for calling a vote of no confidence. It was surprisingly straightforward. Any board member could call an emergency meeting, and a simple majority could remove the CEO. With Vincent's 25% and my influence, we could effectively take control of the company. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Vincent would call for the vote citing Elijah's poor business decisions and declining performance. I'd step in as interim CEO, having already proven my capability as COO. We'd offer Elijah a small buyout for his shares and restructure the company for real growth. As for our relationship, well, that had been over in my mind for months anyway. I was just waiting for the right moment to end things, and this would be perfect timing. Clean break, professional transition, and I'd finally get the recognition and control I deserved. 3 weeks into planning mode, I got careless. Or maybe I got overconfident. Either way, what happened next changed everything, and not in the way I'd expected. It was a Thursday night around 8 p.m., and I was in my office going over the final details with Vincent. We'd decided to call the emergency board meeting for the following week, and I was walking him through exactly how the vote would work. The office was supposedly empty. Elijah had left around 6 saying something about meeting a supplier for dinner. So you call the meeting, I was explaining to Vincent, who was on speakerphone since he'd already left for the day. You cite poor performance, stale designs, whatever. The key is to make it sound like you're reluctantly doing this for the good of the company. And you're sure about the silent partner? Vincent's voice crackled through the speaker. Positive. It's just dead money, dude. A defunct venture capital fund from 10 years ago. They don't exist anymore. The active vote is just you and Elijah, and you have 25% to his 24%. So what exactly are you saying I should do? I laughed. That sharp laugh I get when I'm feeling particularly clever. You don't ask him to step down, Vincent. You don't ask. You tell. We call an emergency board meeting, you vote him out as the majority shareholder, and I step in as interim CEO. And what happens to his shares? Who cares? We dilute them. We vote to issue new shares to ourselves. You for your loyalty, me for my leadership. We'll offer him a buyout for pennies on the dollar. It's clean, it's legal, and Elijah's not a fighter. He'll just accept it and move on. There was a pause, and then Vincent asked the question I'd been expecting. What about, you and him? The engagement. That's been over for months, I said, and it felt good to finally say it out loud. I'm just waiting for the right time to end it. This is perfect timing, actually. Let's vote him off the board and take his shares. It's time we got paid what we're really worth. That's when I heard the door between my office and Elijah's open. I turned around slowly, and there he was standing in the doorway with this expression I'd never seen before. Not angry, not hurt, just cold. Calculating. You weren't supposed to hear that, I said, hanging up on Vincent, because really, what else was there to say? I'd been caught, but I was almost relieved. The pretending was exhausting. Sounds like it. Elijah said, his voice completely flat. A coup. Fun. In my own office. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. The expensive one he'd complimented that morning back when we were still playing house. Don't be dramatic, Elijah. It's just business. You're holding us back. Your designs are getting stale. You're not aggressive enough. And frankly, Vincent and I are tired of carrying you. He just looked at me for a long moment like he was seeing me for the first time, which, in a way, he probably was. Good luck, he said finally, and walked back to his office. I actually laughed. Good luck. That was his big response. I just told him I was planning to steal his company, and he wished me good luck. It was so typical of Elijah. Passive, non-confrontational, weak. This was exactly why he needed to go. 20 minutes later, I got an email notification on my phone. It was from Elijah, sent to Vincent and me. Emergency board meeting called for tomorrow. 2 p.m. conference room A. Be there. I had to admire his initiative even if it was pointless. He was probably hoping to get ahead of the situation. Maybe try to negotiate or appeal to Vincent's loyalty. It wouldn't work. Vincent and I had already made our decision, but at least Elijah was finally showing some backbone. The next day felt electric. I came into the office early, spent extra time on my makeup, and chose my most professional-looking suit, the navy blue one that made me look authoritative. Today was the day I'd finally step into the role I'd been preparing for, and I wanted to look the part. Vincent arrived around noon, nervous energy radiating off him like heat. We spent an hour in my office going over our strategy one more time. He'd present the motion for no confidence, I'd provide the supporting financial data, and together we'd paint a picture of a company that needed new leadership to reach its potential. At 1:45, I walked into conference room A and deliberately sat at the head of the table, Elijah's usual spot. It was a power move, sure, but an important one. Vincent took the seat to my right, and we spread out our materials: financial reports, performance analyses, growth projections. Everything we needed to justify what we were about to do. Elijah walked in at exactly 2 p.m. looking surprisingly calm for someone about to lose his company. He glanced at me sitting in his chair, and I swear I saw the corner of his mouth twitch upward, like he found something amusing. Glad you could make it to your own meeting, I said, all fake brightness. It's my meeting, he replied, taking a seat along the side of the table. Actually, as the majority voting shareholder, Vincent is ceding the floor to me. As COO, I'll be running this. Elijah just nodded. Okay, let's start. I opened my first binder with a flourish. The agenda is simple. First, a review of the company's declining performance under your leadership. I started flipping through pages of carefully selected data. As you can see, the Elias line is down 40% quarter over quarter. Your new projects are massively over budget. We're frankly bleeding money. That's not accurate, Elijah said quietly. I looked at the real numbers yesterday. These are the real numbers, I snapped, because how dare he question my analysis. Which brings us to item 2, a vote of no confidence in you as CEO. Vincent. Vincent cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable but determined. Yeah, Elijah, man, I vote no confidence. Great, I said, smiling triumphantly. That's 25%, and as acting CEO, I also... You don't have a vote, Caitlin. Elijah interrupted. You're not a shareholder, you're an employee. My face heated up, but I kept my voice steady. It doesn't matter. Vincent has 25%, you have 24%. He has the majority of the active board. The vote passes. That's when the conference room door opened and in walked this elderly man I'd never seen before. He was probably in his 80s, walking with a custom cane, wearing a 3-piece suit that probably cost more than my car. I'm sorry, I said, my voice dripping with irritation. Who are you? This is a closed board meeting. The old man just smiled. Not a nice smile. I'm Augustus, he said, walking slowly to the table. And you, young lady, are sitting in my chair. I stared at him in confusion. I don't know who you are, but you need to leave. Security. They know who I am, Augustus said calmly. He looked at Elijah. You called this meeting, but you haven't introduced me properly. Elijah stood up, and for the first time all day, he looked genuinely pleased. Caitlin, Vincent, I'd like you to meet the managing partner of Angel Investor, LLC, my grandfather Augustus. He holds 51% of this company. Vincent went white as a sheet. I felt like the floor had just dropped out from under me. That's not possible, I stammered. That's a defunct VC fund. You're supposed to be dead money. Augustus finally reached the table, tapping the incorporation bylaws with his cane. Defunct, ma'am. I am many things, but I am not defunct. I funded this company with my money, my rules. And, I really do wish people would read the documents they sign. I was sputtering now. This is a conflict of interest. It's nepotism. It's illegal. It's capitalism, dear, Augustus said, pulling up a chair. And you're right about one thing. It is a vote. Elijah, what's the motion? I tried to regain control. I stood up, my voice shaking but loud. No, this is my meeting. You're fired, Elijah. For corporate espionage. For bringing in an unauthorized person. You're fired. Augustus just looked at me with those cold eyes. You're interrupted, he said quietly, but it shut me up instantly. Elijah said, his voice clear and strong, to remove Caitlin from the board and terminate her employment for cause effective immediately for conspiracy to defraud the company, attempted theft of assets, and falsification of financial records. I second, Augustus said, raising his hand. All in favor. Both men raised their hands. That's 75%. Motion passes. Caitlin, you're done. Your network access was cut 10 minutes ago. Security is waiting outside. I just crumpled. All the fight, all the confidence just gone. You snake, I whispered at Elijah. No, he said. I'm just not a fighter. Remember, I'm just a designer. Then he looked at Vincent, who was sweating bullets. Vincent, you hold 25%. Want to make this official? I vote with you. Elijah, Vincent stammered. I've always been with you. She manipulated me. She told me you were running us into the ground. I let out a sound, half laugh, half sob. You coward. You were in this. You wanted this. 2 security guards walked in. Please escort Miss Caitlin off the property, Augustus said. She's not to touch her computer. Her personal effects will be mailed. As they took me by the arms, I stared at Elijah. You'll regret this. You'll run this place into the ground without me. We'll see, he said simply. That was 4 months ago. 4 months of legal battles of lawyers who promised me everything and delivered nothing. 4 months of watching my savings disappear into legal fees while Elijah's grandfather's team of corporate sharks demolished every argument I had. The worst part, the company is thriving. Their latest quarterly report, which I definitely didn't stock on their website, shows record profits. Elijah launched a new sustainable line that's getting written up in design magazines. Vincent is still there, still making his sales numbers, probably grateful every day that he didn't get fired too. I found out through mutual friends that Elijah moved into a new place downtown, one of those converted loft spaces that probably costs 3 times what our old apartment did. No word on whether he's dating anyone, but frankly, I don't care anymore. As for me, I'm working for a mid-level marketing firm now, making about half what I used to make in a cramped office with fluorescent lighting and a broken coffee machine. My new boss is this 28-year-old who calls everyone rock star and thinks synergy is a real business strategy. Look, maybe I made some mistakes. Maybe I should have talked to Elijah directly instead of going behind his back. Maybe I should have negotiated for equity from the beginning instead of assuming I'd get it later. But the truth is, I was the one keeping that company profitable while he played with his sketches and his principles. The engagement ring is sitting in my jewelry box, probably worth more than my current monthly salary. Sometimes I think about selling it, but then I remember it's probably the only valuable thing I have left from that whole mess. Between us, I still think I was right about the business side. Elijah got lucky with his grandfather's money and connections, but luck doesn't last forever. Give it a year, maybe 2, and he'll realize he needs someone like me to keep things running smoothly. But that's his problem now, not mine.